Chapter 1, Arrival. It was a cold, gray morning when Maya stepped off the train. The platform was nearly empty, except for a few passengers dragging their suitcases behind them. The city looked unfamiliar, but strangely welcoming. She tightened the strap of her backpack and took a deep breath. A new place, a new chapter. Maya had left her small hometown in the countryside for the first time in years. Her goal was simple: to find inspiration. As an aspiring writer, she had been stuck in a creative block for months. Every story she started felt dull. Every idea faded before it took shape. Her friends told her she needed a change of scenery, and so here she was, in a city she had never visited, with nothing but a notebook and her curiosity. The streets were quieter than she expected. Small cafes lined the narrow roads, and bicycles clicked softly on the cobblestone. A street performer was playing the violin near a fountain, the notes floating gently through the air. Maya paused for a moment to listen. It felt peaceful. It felt like the kind of place where stories could be born. She had booked a small room in a guest house near the old town. The address was scribbled on a piece of paper, now slightly crumpled in her coat pocket. She checked it again and started walking, letting her eyes wander. There were bookshops, antique stores, and bakeries that smelled like cinnamon and fresh bread. After a short walk, she reached the guest house. It was a charming old building with ivy crawling up the walls. A kind woman at the reception welcomed her, gave her the key, and offered her a cup of tea. Inside her room, Maya placed her backpack on the bed and looked around. It was simple but cozy: a wooden desk by the window, a small shelf with a few books, and a soft chair in the corner. The city outside whispered through the glass. She sat down at the desk and opened her notebook. The page was blank. She stared at it for a long time. Then, someone knocked on her door. It wasn't the receptionist. It wasn't room service. It was a man, perhaps in his 50s, wearing a brown coat and holding a small envelope. "You dropped this," he said. Maya blinked. "I don't think that's mine," she replied politely. He nodded, almost as if he expected her answer. "Maybe not yet," he said with a slight smile. "But it might be." He handed her the envelope, tipped his hat, and disappeared down the hallway before she could say another word. Maya stood frozen for a moment. Then she looked at the envelope. There was no name on it. Only one word: begin. She slowly opened it. Inside was a folded piece of paper. A map. Hand-drawn, old, and slightly faded. At the bottom, a short sentence was written. "Follow the quiet paths. The city remembers." She looked around, almost expecting someone to be watching. But there was no one. Maya placed the map on the desk. Her heart was beating faster now, not with fear, but with something else. Excitement. Could this be the story she was waiting for? Maybe the city had more in store than she had expected. And maybe, just maybe, she hadn't arrived here by accident. Chapter 2, The Notebook. That night, Maya couldn't sleep. The envelope, the man in the brown coat, and the mysterious map, none of it made sense. She stared at the folded paper again and again, as if a hidden message would suddenly appear. Follow the quiet paths. The city remembers. It sounded poetic, almost like a line from one of the old books she used to read. By morning, the sun peeked through the curtains, warming the edges of the small wooden desk. Maya sat up slowly, still holding the map, now a little wrinkled from how tightly she had gripped it in her sleep. She flipped open her notebook. Page after page was still blank. Then she noticed something strange. A small mark on the back cover. It hadn't been there before, or at least, she had never paid attention to it. It was a tiny symbol, like a key crossed with a feather. Curious, she turned to the first page again. This time, she noticed that the paper felt different. Not just regular notebook paper. It felt thicker, older, like parchment. She rubbed her fingers over it and felt something raised under the surface. She held it up to the light. There were faint letters. Invisible ink? Or had it always been there? Slowly, the writing began to appear, as if reacting to the sunlight. Maya stared, amazed. It was a name. Elena. And below that, a date, April 17, 1985. She didn't recognize the name. But the date, it was exactly 40 years ago, just a few days before her own birthday. She flipped through the notebook quickly. On page 3, more writing faded into view. Don't ignore the signs. The city speaks in silence. It was as if someone had written a message for her, but long before she had even arrived. Her curiosity turned into determination. She pulled on her coat, grabbed the map, and stepped outside. The air smelled like fresh bread and spring rain. The streets were still quiet. It was early, and the shops were just beginning to open. She followed the lines on the map. The first mark led her down a narrow alleyway, between a bookstore and a flower shop. The walls were covered in ivy, and a small wooden sign read Silence Lane. She smiled. Follow the quiet paths, the message had said. At the end of the lane, there was a bench, and behind it, a large stone wall with something carved into it. She walked closer. It was the same symbol from her notebook. A key and a feather. And beneath it, a small inscription, "Listen with more than your ears." Maya sat on the bench and opened her notebook again. Another page had changed. A short paragraph had appeared, written in the same invisible ink. Elena found the voice of the city when no one else would listen. If you've come this far, the city believes in you too. Listen to the violin. Maya blinked. The violin? She remembered the street performer from yesterday. She rushed back through the winding streets, following the same path from before. But when she got to the fountain, the violinist was gone. Only a note was left behind, placed gently on the stone where he had stood. It read, "Elena's story is hidden in the notes. Find the melody, and you'll find her truth." Who was Elena? Why was Maya being pulled into this story? Was it just a coincidence? Or was something guiding her? Her heart pounded with a mix of nerves and wonder. She wasn't just looking for inspiration anymore. She was inside a story, and this time, she was the one living it. Chapter 3, The Stranger. Maya walked slowly through the city, the note from the violinist still in her hand. Find the melody, and you'll find her truth. Who was Elena? Why did the city feel like it had been waiting for her? The streets had begun to fill with life. Children chased pigeons across the plaza. The cafes were alive with clinking cups and quiet conversations. Bicycles rolled by with gentle hums, and fresh flowers were being arranged on sidewalk stands. But Maya wasn't focused on any of it. She kept thinking about the messages, the map, the notebook, and that strange man in the brown coat. Had he been part of all this? Did he know Elena? She looked at the map again. There was another small X marked near a building shaped like a bell. It wasn't far from where she stood. She walked quickly now, eager, following the twisting side streets that curved like a maze. Soon, she arrived in front of an old music shop. Its windows were dusty, filled with violins, cellos, and record players. Above the door, in faded gold letters, were the words, Arco and Echo, since 1946. She opened the door gently. A little bell rang as she stepped inside. The smell of wood, varnish, and old paper filled the air. Rows of instruments lined the walls, and at the back of the shop stood a man in a dark vest, carefully tuning a violin. He looked up and smiled. "You're a little early," he said softly. Maya froze. "Do I know you?" she asked. He shook his head. "No. But I know why you're here." He placed the violin on the table and walked over to a dusty cabinet. From it, he pulled out a small leather-bound book. He handed it to her. "Elena used to come here often," he said. "She was a musician. A composer. Quiet, kind, and full of questions, just like you." Maya opened the book. It wasn't music, it was a journal. Inside, Elena had written thoughts, song ideas, and observations about the city. And there it was again, the key and the feather symbol. She believed the city was alive, the man continued. She said it spoke in sounds, in signs, and in silences. Most people just didn't know how to listen. Maya turned the pages slowly. Elena had drawn maps, just like the one she'd received. She had followed sounds, bells, footsteps, fountains, and found meaning in each one. Then Maya noticed a line written near the back of the book. "If you found this, you are the next listener." She looked up at the man. "Why me?" she asked. He gave a soft smile. "Maybe because you were searching. And this city, it finds those who are ready." She closed the book and looked out the window. A young woman stood across the street, watching her. She wore a green scarf and held a violin case. When their eyes met, the woman nodded slightly, then turned and walked away. Maya stepped outside quickly. But by the time she reached the corner, the woman was gone. In her place, a small envelope had been tucked into the cracks of the brick wall. She opened it. Inside was a single music note, drawn by hand, with another message. "Meet me where the echoes live." She looked back at the music shop. The man was gone. The lights were off. As if the shop had never been open. The street was suddenly quiet again. No bicycles. No voices. No birds. Just the sound of wind passing between the buildings. Maya held the journal close and whispered to herself, "What happens when you follow the music too far?" But she already knew the answer. You find the truth. Even if it's hidden in silence. Chapter 4, Following the Clues. Maya stood in the street, the envelope still in her hand. "Meet me where the echoes live." The words repeated in her mind over and over. She turned in every direction, trying to decide what that message could mean. What place holds echoes? Then it came to her, a tunnel, a church, or a theater. A theater. Of course. Old theaters are full of echoes, of music, of voices, of memories. She pulled out the map again. There was a faded mark she hadn't noticed before, near the bottom corner. Next to it, written in very small letters, was a word, Lyria. Maya searched her phone. There it was, the Lyria Theater, about 20 minutes from where she stood. She began walking, past bookstores, galleries, and quiet gardens. The deeper she went into the old part of the city, the more the buildings changed. They became taller, narrower, older. Some leaned slightly forward, as if whispering to each other across the street. Finally, she reached it. The Lyria Theater. It was grand, though clearly abandoned. The gates were closed and rusted. The front windows were dusty, but behind the dirt, she could see faded posters. One of them was for a performance dated May 3, 1985. Elena's name was listed at the bottom. Elena Rivas, composer and first violin. This was her theater. Maya found a side entrance, cracked slightly open. She stepped inside, careful not to make a sound. The air was thick with dust and time. Light poured in through broken glass, casting long shadows across red velvet chairs and golden balconies. She walked slowly to the center of the stage. The floor creaked beneath her feet. The silence was deep, but not empty. She could feel something here. She took out the small music note from the envelope. Then, without thinking, she hummed the note. A single sound. Clear. Pure. It echoed back. Then, another sound joined it. She stopped humming. But the echo continued. Soft violin music, coming from somewhere deep in the theater. She followed the sound, down the stairs, behind the stage, through a hallway lined with old costumes and broken mirrors. The music grew louder. Not recorded. Not digital. Live. She reached a door, slightly open. Inside was a small rehearsal room. Empty, except for a green scarf on a chair, and a violin resting on a music stand. Maya entered slowly. On the music stand was a page of handwritten notes. At the bottom, one more message. The city remembers those who listen. The music leads you to the truth. But only if your heart is open. She sat in the chair, heart pounding. She picked up the violin. She didn't know how to play. But something told her to try. She drew the bow gently across the strings. A soft, imperfect note rang out. Then, something happened. Her notebook, in her coat pocket, grew warm. She opened it. A new page had appeared. A letter. From Elena. Written in her handwriting, dated May 4, 1985, one day after her last concert. To the next listener. If you are reading this, then you have followed the sounds, the signs, and the silences. You were chosen not because of your name or your skill, but because you heard. The city speaks. The stories are still here. All they need is someone to listen. I never left. I became part of this city. And now, so will you. Maya didn't understand everything. But she felt it. This wasn't just a mystery. It was a message. Not only from Elena, but from the city itself. She walked back up to the stage. Stood in the spotlight. And for the first time in years, she felt full of ideas, of emotion, of meaning. She took out her notebook and began to write. Not because she was searching, but because the story had already found her. Chapter 5, Full Circle. The sun was rising over the rooftops of the old town. Light filtered through the narrow alleys, stretching golden fingers across balconies and window panes. Maya sat on a bench outside the Lyria Theatre. Her notebook was full now. Not with random thoughts or scattered ideas, but with a story. Elena's story. Her own story. The city's story. She had written without thinking, guided by instinct, by feeling, and by the quiet voice of the city itself. She flipped through the pages, now stained with coffee, smudged with fingerprints, filled with sketches, memories, and music. Something had changed in her. She no longer felt lost. She no longer felt like she was searching for something far away. Because now, she realized it had always been close. It had always been in the way a place made her feel. In the way silence could speak louder than words. In the way stories could live in shadows, walls, and echoes. As she sat quietly, someone approached. It was the man in the brown coat, the one who had given her the first envelope. He didn't say anything right away. He just sat down beside her and looked out at the quiet street. Then he spoke. "You followed the story," he said. Maya nodded. "I didn't understand it all. But I followed it." "That's enough," he replied. "Elena would be proud." She looked at him, questions rising in her mind. Who was she, really? Why did she leave all of this behind? He smiled gently. She didn't leave it behind. She became part of it. She gave everything she had, her music, her voice, her silence, to the city. And when the world stopped listening, she made sure someone eventually would. Maya looked down at her notebook. "I don't know what to do with all of this now," she whispered. "Then do what she did," he said. "Write. Share. Listen. Let the next person find what you found. Let the story live on." He stood up, tipped his hat, and walked away. No envelope this time. No mysterious message. Just peace. Maya walked through the city one last time. She visited the bookstore. The flower shop. The bench on Silence Lane. Every place felt different now, familiar. Alive. She returned to the guest house, packed her things, and looked out the window one last time. Then she opened her notebook and wrote a single sentence on the last page. She didn't come to the city to find a story. The city found her, and she listened. As the train pulled away from the station, Maya watched the skyline fade into the distance. She was no longer just a visitor. No longer just a writer. She was part of something bigger. And somewhere, someone else would arrive. Someone else would hear the music. Follow the map. Open the notebook. And begin. Because the city never stops whispering. It only waits for the next person to listen. Thank you for listening to the final chapter of The Unfamiliar City. If you found this helpful, please like, subscribe, and click the bell icon for more immersive English practice stories. Until next time, keep listening. Keep learning.